Hey guys, it's Surgeon here, and welcome to my video talking about all 4 different spellbooks in this game. So it occurred to me that there's a lot of different spells out there, and people may not be exactly aware of, well, what is each spellbook good at doing. So I thought I'd go out there and make a video talking about the Standard, Ancient, Lunar, and Arceuus in that order. So hopefully you guys enjoy. I talk about what spellbook you should be using most of the time, what spellbook you should actually probably be sitting on most of the time. And I hope you guys enjoy this video. It took me a little bit of time to put it together. Also, I'm trying to get a new mic in this video, so let me know what you think of that. And with that all being said, I'm going to stop talking and let's get into this video. So starting off, we're going to talk about the Standard Spellbook. Now, this is the first spellbook you're going to get, and it's probably got the most amount of skills on it. It's actually got 66 different spells on it, and it's probably the most diverse spellbook out of any of them. And the reason for this is, well, it's the basic one. It's one you're always going to have. Now, this spellbook, in my opinion, is really good when you're starting off, or if you're ever going to high alch. The reason being is there are a few really good spells on here. For example, you've got a ton of teleports to all the major cities. So you have your Varrock teleport, your Falador teleport, Lumbridge teleport, yada yada yada. And then on top of that, you have some utility spells, such as your high and low alchemy. You have telekinetic grab, which is a low-level money-making method. You have access to the enchants. You have access to Bones to Peaches. You have access to the stuns, which are good for splashing. You have the access to Superheating item, which is basically smithing or smelting something without having to use a furnace. So there's a lot of utility when it comes to this. And there's not only that, but you also have the combat spells, such as like mainly the wave spells, which are what most people tend to use. But you've also got spells like the god spells that you get from the magic training arena. You've got Teleblock as well. You've also got Slayer Dart, Ivan's Blast. You have a lot of really good spells on there. Now, a reason you may want to be on this spellbook in the layer levels is, as you saw in the beginning of this clip, you can do alchemy while doing other skills, namely hunter and agility, but it basically increases your efficiency or your efficient hours played because you're able to train 2 skills at the same time. You're able to train agility and train magic at the same time. However, there are other spells that you can be doing while doing these same skills as well, but it's really up to your kind of preference. To be honest, you can do high alchemy more so than you can some of these other methods, but for other reasons, there's reasons that I tend to stay on other spellbooks besides the standard one. Let's move on to everyone's favorite spellbook, probably, the Ancient Spellbook, or at least the one that most people like covet and fear or whatever. Now, what are some notable spells from this spellbook? Well, namely, you have the barrages, but more like in Toonly, we're talking about Ice Barrage and Blood Barrage. Blood Barrage requires 92 magic, and Ice Barrage requires 96 magic. The reason that this spellbook is so coveted is because of the fact that the barrage spells and the burst spells are one of the few, if not the only spells in the game that can damage multiple creatures at the same time. So as you see on screen right now, I'm able to kill multiple abyssal demons at the same time using one spell, and that makes this spellbook very popular for training magic because of the fact you can do so much damage at the same time. It's just like chinning for ranging. However, that's really kind of the only benefit of this spellbook. It's really a combat-oriented spellbook that if you're PKing or hybriding, yeah, you're probably going to want to use it. Or if you're doing Slayer, where you're bursting or barraging a lot of tasks, you're probably going to want it. But other than that, that's purely what it is. It's pretty much just a combat spellbook. Now, granted, some of the abilities on it are very good. The Ice Barrage and Ice Burst have the ability to freeze someone in place to where they can't move for a longer period of time than Entangle can. And then Blood Barrage and Blood Burst and all the blood spells have the ability to siphon life. Basically, some of the damage that they do to enemies will actually heal you. And with Blood Barrage, it is insane how much damage you can actually heal. So there are some very good perks to these abilities, but they are pretty expensive. These spells do cost a hefty amount of runes, especially the barrages. We're talking bloods, deaths, souls, and an elemental rune at times. So they do tend to rack up the price a little bit. But for training purposes, this is a very good spellbook. They also have a few really good teleports, but the teleports are very situational. They're teleports that teleport you into the wilderness, so trying to get to the KBD or trying to get to some of the wilderness bosses, they're really good for that. But it's not really a spellbook you want to be sitting on because unless you're doing combat, you're not going to get a whole lot of use out of this spellbook. Alright, moving on to Lunars. Now, Lunar Spellbook, like how the Ancient Magic Spellbook was a pretty much fully offensive spellbook, the Lunar Spellbook is pretty much a fully utility spellbook. There's basically no offensive spells in it, such as spells that actually do direct damage. But there's a lot of utility spells on this spellbook. Namely, the more important ones, you've got ones like Fertile Soil, which basically super composts the patch. You've got Plank Make on there, String Jewelry, a bunch of these weird kind of utility-based spells where they don't really serve a purpose. But for training purposes, they're great training spells. For example, Plank Make is one of the few profitable ways to train your magic without doing combat and still gain a relatively high amount of experience per hour. And also, you've got the ability to... You also have access to spell Magic Imbue at level 83 or at level 82 magic, which is basically a 0 time lost way to train magic, which is basically saying that you can do it while doing anything else and it won't interrupt your training of it. I do this all the time when I did agility. If you remember when I did Hunter on my Road to Max, I did it all the time on there. There's a lot of times where I'm using this spell. I'm using Magic Imbue constantly. It's 0 time and it's basically a way to train magic. Yes, it's very slow because you're not directly training it, but it's a unique way to train it without having to actually invest time into it. But that's not the only thing that this spellbook offers. You've also got other ways to make money, such as the Tan Leather spell once you've done the Falador or the Fremenic Hard Diaries. And what that does is it tans up to 5 hides at any one time. And as you can see, I can tan Black Dragon Hide into Dragon Leather and make money off of it and train magic at the same time. Or what else I can do, I can also check on all my farming patches at the same time using the Geomancy spell. Or if I'm running around and one of my crops is diseased, I can use the Cure Plant spell. Or if I want to bake pies, I've got Pie Bake. The point of the matter is there's a lot of really good spells in this spell book. You've also got Vengeance. I mean, how could I forget Vengeance? Everyone knows that spell. But how could I forget that? Like, there's so many good uses for this spell book that makes it a very well-rounded spellbook, and probably, in my opinion, one of the better ones to sit on, for the fact that there's really a situation to where you could find benefit in it for most everyday use. I use it all the time for Magic Imbue, and pretty much if you're high enough level for Magic Imbue, I highly advise doing it because you're basically wasting no time to train it. But even the teleports on here are pretty good too. You have the ability to teleport to Lunar Isle, which is great for if you're crafting Astrals. You can teleport to Waterbirth Isle, so if you're doing Dagonoth Kings, that's great. Teleport to Catherby, it's the quickest way to get to the Catherby farming patch. Teleport to the Crafting Guild, I mean, you can do fucking skills necklaces, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. There's so many good things about this spellbook. The only thing I'm going to say, though, is that it's really not worth it to sit on it until you can do some of those higher level spells. So until you can do Fertile Soil at 83, or until you can teleport to Catherby, or until you can do Magic Imbue, it's not worth it to sit on this spellbook, because you're not going to get any use out of it. Once you hit, like, probably about 83 or so, I would advise sitting on the spellbook, because you're going to actually start getting used out of it on a daily basis. Alright, the last spellbook we're going to talk about is the Arceuus, or the Arceuus, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. But basically, it's a spellbook you get from the Arceuus house, and in order to activate this, you have to have 60% favor with the Arceuus house, which, if you don't know how to do that, there's plenty of guides for that on the internet, or I can make one day if you guys want. Now, the main points, or the main spells on this spellbook are obviously the Reanimate and Sold Heads. And the reason this is probably one of the more talked about points, talked about spells of the spellbook, is that it's a pretty GP efficient way to train your prayer, because it doesn't cost a whole lot for the spells. It doesn't cost a whole lot for the heads, and they give relatively good prayer experience. In fact, I think if you do unicorn heads all the way to 99, I think it costs you like 10 mil or some shit. It's like super cheap. It takes forever, but it's a cheap way to actually train up prayer. However, that's not the only real benefit about this spellbook. The teleports on here are actually pretty good. If you've done the Elite Mauritania Diaries, then the teleport to Harmony Island is actually really good for you, because it's going to take you right to that 7th herb patch instead of having to teleport to Mostly Harmless or teleport to the Ectofuntus and run all the way there. So there's that spell that's very handy. You have the teleport to Barrows, which is also very nice for money making. And then you also have the teleport to the graveyard right next to the Canonfist Fairy Ring. So if you're trying to do your Bittercap Mushroom Harvest, then it puts you right there, which is very handy as well. But at the end of the day, most people are going to be using this spellbook for obviously the reanimation spells to train their prayer, or anything that they've gotten from Slayer. But keep in mind that the teleports on here are very good, and you can get teleport tablets as well. So It's a good spellbook overall, but obviously it's a very situational spellbook. And if you really want to teleport anything off of it, just get a teleport tab. Everything else is pretty situational, so I wouldn't recommend sitting on this one. Alright, before we actually end up this video, one thing I want to talk about is what spellbook would I recommend you sit on? Well, personally, I kind of went over this in the actual description of all the spellbooks, but to be honest, I would sit on the normal spellbook or the standard spellbook until you're about 83 magic or so. And then once you've got 83 magic, I would recommend that you sit on the Lunar Spellbook pretty much forever. Switch when you need to, but the Lunar Spellbook, especially if you're doing magic imbue all the time, is going to actually give you more benefit in the long run than sitting on the standard spellbook, because on the Lunar Spellbook you can actually make use of it all the time. So that's my recommendation. Up until about 83 magic, stay on the standard spellbook. Once you hit 83, switch over to Lunars. It's what I do. I just enjoy the Lunar Spellbook, especially as a skiller. It's one of my favorite things. If you're more of a Slayer person, you're sitting on Slayer for a while, going for 99, you might want to actually sit on the Ancient Spellbook, because you're going to be bursting a lot or barraging a lot of tasks, especially if you try to maximize that. But with that being said, y'all, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I hope you enjoyed the new mic quality as well. It just came in. I just set it up. I hope it turns out well. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to subscribe for more content, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you want to give me feedback on what you thought of the video, go ahead and put it in the comment section below, or troll me as well in the comment section. That's what that's there for. If you want to join my CC or my Discord, both of those will be in the description. And with that being said, y'all have a great morning, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is. I'll catch y'all later.